So, have you ever wondered what really separates a brilliant idea from a funded, growing business? It's not always about how good the product is, it's often about how ready the business is. Today, we're going to dive into the story of Aquapure, a startup with a world changing idea that was honestly on the verge of failing before it even got started. So, let's meet our heroes, Maria and Ken. These two are amazing engineers who poured literally everything, all their life savings, into creating this revolutionary low-cost water filter. Their mission? It was super noble, to bring safe drinking water to rural communities. They had the passion, they had the product, but they were about to hit a massive wall. And this is why. 2 million ringgit. That's what they needed to really scale up, to go from a tiny operation running on fumes to a company that could actually make a huge impact. This number was the only thing standing between their dream and reality. Okay, so here's the catch. Maria and Ken, they could design a complex filtration system in their sleep. But their business records, it was, and I'm not kidding, basically a shoebox full of receipts and random bank statements. Now, to you and me, that might just sound messy. To a potential investor, that is a gigantic red flag. And that brings us to the big question, right? When you've got this amazing idea, but the back end is just total chaos, how in the world do you bridge that gap? How do you take a pile of messy paperwork and turn it into a professional pitch that convinces someone to write a 2 million ringgit check? All right, so here's how we're going to walk through their journey. First, we'll look at the startup's big problem. Then, how they went from that messy data to real clarity. We'll check on the company's financial health, see how they valued their future, and then get them investor ready with risks and rules. And finally, we'll see the blueprint for their final pitch. Let's get into it. First up, the startup's big problem. Because, as we're about to see, having a great product just isn't enough. Okay, so let's set the scene. You've got Maria and Ken, our brilliant engineers. Their mission is rock solid, providing safe water. They've already proven there's a market with some modest sales all funded out of their own pockets. And now they have a meeting with Mr. Tan, an angel investor who could make their dream a reality with that 2 million ringgit investment. And boom, this is the moment the brakes slam on. Mr. Tan's request wasn't out of line. It was completely standard. He wasn't just investing in their passion, he needed to see the cold, hard numbers presented professionally. He needed proof that this was a real, viable business, not just a passion project. Okay, next up, let's look at how they started to climb this mountain, moving from that messy data to real clarity by building some professional financial tools. Now, the very first step was a huge mental shift. See, they were using cash basis accounting. It's kind of like a personal diary. You just write down money when it comes in or goes out. Simple, right? But investors need what's called accrual basis accounting. This is more like an official biography. It records revenue when you've earned it, not just when you get paid, and expenses when you incur them, not just when you pay the bill. It gives a much, much truer picture of a company's health. And making that switch isn't magic. It really boiled down to 3 key things. First, they had to calculate depreciation, the fact that their machinery was getting older and less valuable. Second, they had to properly value their inventory, all those filters sitting on the shelf. And third, they had to record accruals. Think of bills they owed but hadn't actually paid yet. Each little step added a new layer of professional accuracy. All right, part 3, the company's financial health. So with these brand new, clean financials in hand, it was time for the moment of truth. What did the numbers actually say? Now, to get what comes next, we have to talk about something called liquidity ratios. The easiest way to think about this is like a company's vital signs, like its pulse and blood pressure. It basically measures if you can pay your bills that are due, like right now. For an investor, a bad liquidity ratio is a serious, serious warning sign. And here it is. This is why they had to do all that work. The analysis revealed a huge hidden weakness. While their long-term ability to pay debts was okay, their liquidity was critically low. This means they were constantly at risk of not being able to pay their suppliers, even while making sales. It's a classic cash flow trap that sinks so many new businesses. Okay, so on to section 4, valuing the future. They now know their big weakness, so how could they possibly justify asking for 2 million ringgit? Well, it all comes down to one question: how much is a great idea actually worth? To figure this out, they used a standard financial tool called discounted cash flow, or DCF. Let me break it down. Imagine I promise to give you 1 ringgit every year for the next 10 years. That's not really worth 10 ringgit to you today, right? Because of risk, inflation, all that stuff. DCF is just a fancy way to calculate what all that future money is actually worth in today's terms. It's how you turn a big vision into a single concrete number. All right, next up, getting investor ready. Because having a valuation isn't enough. A smart investor needs to see that you're not just dreaming about success, you're building a fortress for growth by planning for what might go wrong. See, a really smart startup thinks about problems before they happen. Aquapure identified its biggest risks. What if something happens to Maria or Ken? What about supply chain problems? And the big one, they had no experience with large-scale manufacturing. But here's the brilliant part. For every risk, they had a solution ready to go. This shows Mr. Tan they're not just dreamers, they're serious planners. And that brings us to the final section, the final pitch blueprint. This is where all that hard work, the accounting, the valuation, the risk planning, it all comes together to structure the actual deal. So, based on that DCF valuation they worked so hard on, they made a clear, confident offer. For his 2 million ringgit, Mr. Tan would get a 30% equity stake in the company. The founders would keep 70%. And this wasn't a number they just pulled out of thin air. It was a figure completely justified by all that financial modeling. And this part is absolutely critical. They showed him exactly where every single ringgit would go. This wasn't just money for salaries. It was fuel for strategic growth. They had a plan to build a factory, launch marketing campaigns, set up a distribution network, and even use green tech tax incentives to make that investment go even further. Which brings us right back to the beginning, to you. Think about their journey for a second. They went from a chaotic shoebox of receipts to a full set of professional financials, a clear-eyed risk plan, a justified valuation, and a strategic roadmap for growth. They didn't just ask for money, they proved they were ready for it. So let me ask you, if you were Mr. Tan, would you write the check?